saying a faith. Got it. Okay. I had just had a note that you're recording me. Anyhow, we went to Angel Fire to the veteran cemetery, and we were all on our knees in prayer and weeping. And, you know, I openly pray and openly weep now. And I can tell you that my old model was early in my sobriety. If Stacy, who's in Florida, had started talking about God in the meeting, I didn't want to hear her referring to God. I wanted to have a very vague introduction about whatever she wanted to say about some kind of what I believe to be religious impression she had. And that didn't at any level give me any security. In fact, I resented Stacy through the entire meeting because I believed that she was impressing upon me the God that I had come up with when I was young. My mother was an evangelical Christian, and she wanted me to get saved. And that's not to diminish anybody's religious positions or spiritual walk, but you know, I'd go down there and get reborn, and then I'd be getting drunk and shooting dope, and it really didn't look like there'd been much of a change in you know, in sort of at the cellular level or the spiritual level of Edith. So I didn't want to hear about that. And I heard Sandy Beach say in a talk, you know, my story changed, my view changed. And what he was talking about is that there came a point in time when he was absolutely able to hear the word God and understand that that was the God of his own understanding. And there wasn't anybody else's reference that he had to take issue with, or that he had to be unhappy with or distressed from, because it was the God of his understanding. And that he had, for 10 years, just like me, had found that to be reprehensible. And he started then referring to God openly and without any reservation. That's how I do now too. Right before we started this show, I was on my knees in my office saying my prayers and saying, God, be in my heart, be in my head, be in my tongue. So that's how I often will, not often, that's how I always commence any kind of talk in AA. I'm an attorney. It's hard to believe because I was, the same year I was inducted into the bar, I was going in front of the Board of Pardons and Paroles in Alabama and begging for mercy. And they gave me a pardon because of you, because you had taught me how to conduct myself. I'm telling you that story because when they gave me that law license, it was a product of the Jesuits letting me into law school. Nobody else would have given me a ride to go to further education, particularly law school, with the Jesuits. And so just like Beach was talking about my story changed about organized religion, because they were about second chances. Somebody with a long criminal record who was a convicted felon, they let me go to law school. And then I get through law school, and the Bar Association and Bar Commission determined that I would know I could not be seated for the bar exam. And so when that came down, I started throwing a lot of rocks at God and saying, I dropped a lot of money on this. I spent a lot of time at this. I knew the journey of 1,000,000 miles started with the very first step, and I took it. And then I took 2,000 more. I was the commencement speaker at my law school graduation. I was on the law review. I deserve I'm entitled to this. What do you mean the Bar Commission's going to deny me a license? I was furious with whatever God all of you were talking about. I went to my sponsor, who was a RN, had never been to law school or had any legal training, and she said, "Well, is there an appeal process?" Oh, I'm the graduate, but I didn't consider the appeal process. So I went through the appeal process, and they reversed their decision. I relied on a God that I didn't fully understand to give me the courage to go speak to people who I had gone back and made amends to, like former employers and 2 of my professors. And I laid it all out for them, and they all stood by me in that reconsideration process. And now, when I'm in front of the Supreme Court of the state of Nebraska, you know where I go before any argument I have to make? To the women's bathroom. And you know what I do? I get down on my knees on the tile floor and thank God that I've got the privilege to practice law and a law license. And I ask him to be in my heart and my head and my tongue, just like I did before I started this hoedown y'all got going on here. Because I know that if I've got him with me, that I'm going to have everything I need. I heard Johnny Harris a long time ago when I first got here to Omaha. I was taken away from Alabama in handcuffs. And that's a longer story, and that isn't for tonight. But anyway, they never wanted me back in Lee County, we'll put it that way, okay? Which is where Auburn University is. And that's where I was when not my last arrest, but my biggest arrest. So I'm here in Omaha, and I come in and didn't, wasn't really involved or engaged in AA. And I got arrested one more time. And this time the EMTs had to get me out of a car, and I'd been in a train car accident. And if you've ever seen me in person, I got a big scar under my throat because the windshield went through my throat. But I still can sing country music fairly well. But anyhow, I was in jail again, and they'd taken my blood while I was in the hospital, of course, without my permission, and I was arrested again. But I ended up in front of a judge, and one of the things that happened is I got a big bracelet, of course, on my leg, and I had, I was told I had to go to AA. And because of that process, I, became a member, got a home group, found a sponsor, and all those disciplines started working in my life. But as I said earlier, I really wasn't a prayerful person. But as time passed, I knew I had to have some help. And I knew it had to be stronger than me. And the first great example of this was I met a guy in some meetings, and I'm sure there's some new people here, and you've probably heard these sort of rules that we have, or they're just suggestions. Actually, they're not rules, because we don't have rules. We know that if you don't if you don't do what's suggested, you know, the end product is pretty severe. So one of them, a couple of things I tell you when you're newly sober is, you know, be careful about where you're going, because if you go into the barbershop over and over, you might get a haircut. And you know, be mindful of your relationships. Well, I worked in a bar and I met a guy in some meetings, and after about 2 months, we moved in together. And but I was desperate to stay sober, you know. So I was going to meetings and talking to my sponsor. And he and I had a pretty tumultuous time because neither of us were up for this job of being, you know, collaborative or considering the first tradition and what's the common welfare in this relationship. And because we were both, you know, just tenderfoots, man. And anyhow, as predicted, he told me to you know, this thing was over. And I couldn't take it. You know, I kept going back and telling him, I had to explain to him and what he'd done wrong. I wanted to put him in a, you know, a lockup here like this and get him convinced that he'd made the biggest mistake of his life, because I was such a prize. And he said to me, you know, things are just too hard between us, and you always want to know where I am and what I'm doing. That whole idea of taking a hostage. I had never in my lifetime grieved anything without drugs and alcohol. And so anytime somebody blew their head off or OD'd or was in a bad car accident back in Alabama, we'd all have a big party and everybody'd get real drunk. And then we'd stay up all night down at their gravesite, wherever they got buried. We'd leave all of our beer cans and a half-gallon of whiskey and all our paraphernalia and give them a good send-off. That's what we did when people died. I never had any conscientious recognition of the loss. But in sobriety, when this guy put a boot to me, I was in absolute free fall. I'd never been that untethered before without something to take the edge off. And that's where I started begging for help from something I didn't really understand. And I was holding on. I lost 15 pounds. I cried every day for about 3 months. And when the clerk at the department store would ask me how I was doing, I told her for 25 minutes about what a sorry son of a gun this guy had been to me, and did she understand the depth of this tragedy. And boy, my sponsor just set me up right about this thing. Don't call him anymore. He doesn't want to hear from you. Don't talk about him to anybody. That's disrespectful. Of course, there wasn't any social media back then for me to disparage him on. You know, I couldn't do a TikTok video of how this son of a gun had screwed me. So she said, if anybody asks you about him, you just tell them things went, y'all separated and things are over, and you had a good time while you were with him. I said, hell no, I'm not going to talk that way about this guy. Do you understand? This is how self-serving I was. Everything was about me. Did you understand the depth of my problems? And did you see how he needs to, my entire panel of people need to side with me and really deprecate him? So that's all a story we all understand. You know, my ego, I didn't, it's recuperative, as Tebow talks about, you know, our ego's recuperative. What do we do about it? We have to have a disciplined way of life to change that. And that's when I really started praying because I knew that I couldn't manage this with my best horse and a missile launcher, which is how I usually take things over. And I feel like I've got the skills and the strength, no matter what, to take care of things. So just, let me get marshaled up. And instead, I had to, just like I had with drugs and alcohol, I had to completely surrender. And I did. And I surrendered and joined in a relationship with a God of my understanding, which again is still unfinished and is very amorphous. I wrote down some considerations in terms of, what does my prayer life look like? What does my meditative life look like? And how does that give me a sense of belonging? Some of the gals I sponsored, we had a meditation accountability group. And so we would all read quietly in the morning, and then we'd text each other and to memorialize our commitment. But one of the gals who does homeless outreach, she's a stupendous woman, but hers would always be, I wish and then she'd have a couple of cuss words, birds would settle down. Or I wish, it was always the distraction that she had felt. When really being quiet and alone, I now appreciate. But that's come with over 3 decades of sobriety. And I can tell you it wasn't that way. My old running buddy who was in the car with me when my car was hit by a train, and she had a bad injury. But she was murdered in the French Quarter on 4/20/2021 during COVID. And I had a very bad reaction to this because I was so enraged. And I told my husband, I said, I'm not sure what I'm going to do over this. I, of course, brought it up to my sponsor and wrote some inventories about this guy and was following him, the man who had first had been charged with murder and then later manslaughter. But I started walking every night with a headlamp, and I'd walk till midnight, sometimes later than that. There's an old country music song, I think Flatt and Scruggs used to sing it, called I'm Walking the Floor Over You. And that's what I felt like. I was walking the floor over Jane because I missed her so much. And there wasn't any sense to this. But I kept telling God I knew that I was going to, be called on to help her daughter, her grandson who's autistic, who I've known for years. What do you need me to do? How can I change Edith's egotistical mind to give me a servant's heart for a little while, for a short time? And I went down to Alabama and at her daughter's request and gave a eulogy, or I guess I'd just call it, gave a memorial. Some preacher with, kind of hammer and tongued it with the eulogy, and he did a real fine job. Then they played some Greg Allman and Bob Seger, and then they asked me to come up, okay? And after that, we all went out to Trinity Mountain, Jane was kind of country, and all her family lived up on the mountain. We called it Johnson Mountain. It's out in Trinity, Alabama, a county adjacent to where I grew up. And everybody out there was doing a lot of things we used to do. And I knew that was going to be the case. And I'd gotten prayed up before I went out there. But I just took all those kids and ran the fields and the property. And all of them were talking about Gigi. That's what they call Jane, Gigi up there in the sky. You think Gigi can see us? I said, oh, yeah, I'm sure she can. while all the other folks were back at the, the cabin doing what they do. And they got every right to, because they don't have the disease I have. But I've been praying to and for Jane for many years. Now I'm praying to her. I just got back from Egypt and Tunisia a few weeks ago. And everywhere that you're traveling, even on a boat traveling down the Nile all the way to Abu Simbel, you are the beneficiary of the call to prayer. And it was a great privilege. And I've been to other Muslim countries, but it was a great privilege to be reminded 5 times a day and to see a man dismantle a tropical tree, but then jump from his job to get down on his knees on his prayer rope. And many people, and some of you may practice this faith, will be very, they clean themselves, and I've been to mosques and watched that. And I thought, these people don't seem to be inconvenienced at all. This woman that I'm standing with at the museum, who's now cleaning her feet and her areas around her head before she's praying in the middle of the day, isn't inconvenienced at all. She's proud to do it. It's a privilege. And it reminded me once again of the irreverence that I carry around most of the day. I have a home group. It's called the Mayflower. And we welcome you there anytime you're in Omaha, Nebraska. We meet at 7 p.m. on Monday night. And a woman from my church told me about her grandson. And that young kid has been coming to my home group and comes up and hugs me every Monday night. Maybe he wants me, maybe he's propagandizing me to be sure his granny knows he's there. But I'm considering that my man Jamal is there now a few weeks in a row because, there's this, he's got a little sunlight on him now. And it's a great opportunity from my lens when he walks up there to say a few comments if he gets called on. I just always say to God, thank you. Thank you for getting him here. Thank you for his child not to have an absent father or a dead father. My closest friend here's son in August of 2017 overdosed. He was on life support for a while. This is a kid I saw born, and he died on August 27th. And so at my home, if you ever come to Omaha and visit me, we have open house on Easter and Thanksgiving. And as I say, from the judiciary, from the homeless to the judiciary are welcome. But I got a whole wall at my house of people who died. And I pray for them on that day of their death. And then I contact their family members. Sometimes, not everybody on that wall, of course, but people that I think about from time to time. And it's a great reminder to me. Many of them have died from drugs and alcohol. Not all of them, but many of them. Grace is so big that it's impossible to understand. But I know that I am in community in this dimension and in another dimension, and maybe many other dimensions that I don't understand because of Alcoholics Anonymous. I know that Max, my friend's son, has some influence on me as I carry on. I'm confident of that. I had a good friend named Steve who had Parkinson's disease, and he died here in Omaha. And I was in a hospice room with him, laying down by him because he couldn't walk or sit up. And he was an Elvis impersonator. And so I was playing Kentucky Rains on my phone when he died. And his daughters, I called them, and his sponsor, and we all had just a good time there together over his body. But when his daughters set up his funeral, what kept coming to me was, I need to dress up for this funeral. And some people said to me, that's very irreverent. You shouldn't do that. So I bought a gold lame jumpsuit, and I got some real high heels. And that's what I wore to the funeral. Now, that may seem inappropriate, but I'm telling you, and I know that if I've got a straight line to the juice, it's probably not exactly, it's probably my ego. But I felt like Steve wanted me to be there in a gold lame jumpsuit, so that's what I wore. I guess I'm telling you that story because he's another person I call on and ask for help from. I had a lot written down here, but I'm gonna, because I know I'm mindful of the time, I'm gonna just tell you that prayer and meditation dispel hate. It rights what's crooked with me. And I had a serious resentment against a guy. His wife was of some notoriety here in this area, and I've represented her for many years. And her husband was legally trained. And we had litigation for years, and he disparaged me in every way he could, put me in front of disciplinary committees with frivolous reasons. He would attack our judges, so they would recuse themselves. He would sue them, sue me. And I grew to hate this guy. And it was, well over a year that this was developing and percolating. And my father was dying in 2012, and he called my client up on some matters, and we didn't exactly answer him. And because of my client's notoriety, she got some pretty harsh treatment in court that I thought was unwarranted. But I turned everything, instead of considering, and I took, I went up and said, our office failed to do this. Please level this on me. Judge said it was her duty. She should have executed it. She did. So I turned my magnifying mind on him. Thought about him all the time. Told my private detective, I want you to start finding out a few things, because we're going to see to his dismantlement. And I'm going to be at the, in the leadership of this model that I've got in my mind. I lost weight. I grew to hate him. Every time he would call me, my blood pressure would go up about 42 points. And I was operating on complete fear and ego. So I went to Wendell, who runs the Sweat Lodge, where I go and be quiet and know that I'm not God from time to time. I went to a Jesuit priest. I went to my sponsor. And you know what all of them said? When are you going to start praying for this guy? What are you going to do about this? How are you going to change? What is going to be the transformation of you? You all already knew the answer. I'd done inventories about this with my sponsor. I'm surprised she didn't just throw a brick at my head and say, I hope something can dispel the concrete that lives in there. But I finally got to the point that I started praying for this guy, just like 551 and 552 of our book talk about. And what happened was, day and night, I prayed for him. And it says 2 weeks. Try 4 months, okay? That's the recalcitrance of me. Those are the stalactites that live inside of me. They're just completely calcified. You can't break them down that easy. You have to have like spiritual muscle work over and over and over. But what happened was it dissolved because of the spiritual part of this program. And the next time I was in a trial, and this son of a gun was on the other side, all of that, I'm really don't have much anxiety about anything, but the anxiousness that would come to my being when I was with that guy was gone. And here's why. Because I had prayed for him over and over and over. And because I knew that day when I walked in that courtroom that Michael and all the archangels were behind me. Every Lakota who I sweated with, and every member of Alcoholics Anonymous, from my home group to Toronto, Canada, to a meeting that I was on in Antarctica on the boat when I had a bucket by me where I was throwing up because I was seasick. Every single person I've ever met in AA has made an impression on me. And all of you were with me in that courtroom, standing behind me. And when you've got that kind of chain link fence that you're in, you are more formidable against alcoholism, which meant that my ego was deterred. I could see this guy for who he was. And if he walked in my office today, I wouldn't care. I'd probably shake his hand. I still don't like him. I still think he was the cause of a lot of pain and hardship to his family. But he's who he is. So I just want to close with this. 2 things. One, oh, that's okay. You're showing me 5 minutes. Thank goodness they didn't say stop now. Here's the shepherd's hook. Get off the stage. I thought about 2 things for closing. Of course, namaste, the Hindus say, may the God in you see the God in me, which is that sense of belonging that Johnny Harris talked about the first time. I started with that and never finished. But when he came to town and I was newly sober, he started talking about, did you have a hole? Did you have a hole that ran through you? That's what was wrong with me. And I couldn't shoot enough, drink enough, snort enough, whatever else you do, freebase enough, take enough pills for that to ever be remedied, because it required spiritual triage. And you know what? I was buying what he was selling. I knew that Harris's story was mine. And that's what we're talking about when we're talking about unity. Alcoholics Anonymous gave me a unifying channel with every person that I've met. Now, I'm not going to be unified with everybody, but they have maybe been a counterexample for me, and maybe I've been a counterexample. for some people, but in some way they've affected me. And Calvin said, I'm home, you're home. And I've been in meetings in a lot of places, including in Cairo, where there's 23 million people and 11 posted weekly meetings in English, with English speaking. And you know what? When that cab driver let me off and said, you sure you want to get off here and where are you going? And I said, I'll find it. And I walked up to the big group with a fire burning outside. I knew I was home. I knew I was home. So Aretha used to sing a song that Carole King wrote, and it was, some of the language goes, when my soul was in the lost and found, you came to claim me. So thank you. Thank you for claiming me out of Lost and Found, Alcoholics Anonymous, and to every one of you folks at this Toronto meeting. It's been my great privilege. I hope you have Godspeed from here on. Thank you.
Please unmute yourself.
Thank you very much. Thank you all for your service. I'm Pat Olson, alcoholic. Wow, Edith, thank you so much. Really, really appreciated your share. And I just made a couple of notes, but I do have a question. And I love the God of my not understanding. You know, I don't know that I'll ever understand. You know, I probably won't, and maybe you can't, but I love that. I relate to that. And also the way you talked about going from ego to a servant's heart, you know, that shift from ego when we go on the other side of the spectrum is the servant's heart, and the trip going there, you know, so humbling. Thank you for that. And I wondered if you could just talk a little bit more about spiritual triage.
Well, I just made up that word when I was talking. But, you know, here's a little story. So about 2 Fridays ago, one of the gals I sponsor a couple of gals who work with homeless people and in shelters. And but Brenda calls me and she says, I got a guy and he's in bad shape. And we need to go over there and 12-step him. His auntie called me, and I've known him for a long time, and he's been in and out of the hospital. Anyway, we get over to this house, me, Brenda, and 2 guys we know. And the house is pretty broken down, but the guy this is no kidding, Pat. He's got 4 tubes coming out and 4 bags hanging over. And he says, and there's cats, and the cats are jumping on and off the table. We're around this table. I'm kind of nervous about even having my hands on the table because anyway, where the cats are jumping and the cats are eating all of their food is on the table. And Pat's wondering, boy, this doesn't seem to be a very insightful answer to my question. But this guy, as time passed, started asking us questions, okay? Got a bunch of broken down cabinets, and then he's got a roommate, and his roommate comes down in a nightgown. So his roommate, who is a male, is dressed like a woman, and he walks in while we're all seated at the table, and he's just like getting something to eat. Anyway, we're trying to keep this momentum with the guy, but it's a little bit distracting with all that's going on. So what is spiritual triage? All I can tell you is that guy called me the next day. I picked him up. I said, hey, did you clean out the bags before we go to the meeting? I want you to go in there, drain all your bags. because he's got, he's got all of his organs are not working. Okay. Typical alcoholic, we run it to the end.
Mhm.
He's hepatic looking, all yellow. Anyway, guy calls me, goes to the meeting with me. Been texting me, he's back in the hospital. Well, is that spiritual triage? I don't know. All I know is I got the chance, so did the other three of us, to go on a 12-step call. But the background to that is the guy that showed up on that 12-step call to minister to this guy, if you want to call it that, was a guy I picked up during COVID at the homeless shelter. And he was so drunk, they wouldn't keep him. And nobody would take him because of COVID. So they put him like a piece of a hog in my back seat. And I took him to the ER. And he's sober now. And he was on the 12-step call. And he was telling this guy that he had been to 32 shelters and treatments. So I guess I'm just observing what I think is spiritual triage. I'm not sure. But if you're on the front line, you're going to be watching it, aren't you?
Yeah.
And maybe you'll get to be, maybe you'll be part of it. And that probably just meant that I didn't throw the drunk guy out of the back seat of my car when he kept lighting his cigarette and burning holes in the back seat, I don't know.
Love it. Thank you so much, Edith. I really appreciate it. A 12-step call could potentially be triage right there. So thank you so much.
There's somebody who needs some triage.
Thank you, Pat. Hannah, please unmute yourself.
Yeah, hi, Hannah H. Thanks, Edith, for your message. That was beautiful. I was just wondering, I'm someone, I related a lot in terms of your career, and I'm wondering how you balance recovery and accomplishment with the big job and striving for accomplishment and perfection, and where that becomes like a problem for you in recovery.
That's a big question. One, I'm not important. Two, as soon as this meeting ends and I get to, thank y'all, I'm going to my real job in AA, which is cleaning the toilets and mopping the floors. I got a crew at my Tuesday night meeting. There's a couple of hundred people there, and I got a crew of 10 people. And I oversee the cleanup crew. Only in AA do you move up to cleaning toilets. So that's one thing. I'm not that important. And two, the other thing, this is such an important question for me. I went to so thank you for asking me, Hannah. I went to a party one time. This is like, I don't know, probably 17 years ago. And there were 3 people there who'd all worked for me and left because I procrastinate. And I wanted everybody to work till 2 a.m. because that's when I'm working. And when I get ready for a trial, I have this process I follow, and I'm completely focused. And you better understand what I'm thinking, even if I don't report it to you or communicate it to you. And I was a total bitch as a boss. So these women had all quit. And when I got to that party and I saw them all, it dawned on me, there's 3 good women who used to work for me. And the next thing that happened was I was at this bar association meeting, and this guy said he did coaching for lawyers. This is before coaching was real big. And he said, and because all y'all are here getting CLE credit, I have put your names into this hat, and whoever gets chosen is going to be I'm going to give them a free hour. And guess who he chose? Me. So I hired him. He lived in Florida. the day he was flying here, which, I took the hour time, but then I hired him to do this coaching with me. I was completely paralyzed with fear, Hannah, because I thought he's going to come down here and undress me. He's going to see the disorderliness of my work processes. And he did. Came down here, interviewed my partners, interviewed everybody that worked in our firm, shadowed me around. And I'm like, damn it, this was premature. Why'd I hire this guy? Unzip me. Get transparent. Because I told my sponsor I wanted to work on being a more considerate boss and having a work environment where people wanted to be. And I worked with him for a year. As I said, I'm not a fast learner, I'm a fast forgetter. But that took my ego down many notches because I'm not that important. That people should leave their family and stay in the office till 2 a.m. because that's when I'm working. So I learned a lot because of you, because of AA, because of step 6 and 7. So thank you for asking that question.
Thank you, Hannah. Lorraine, please unmute yourself.
Hi, good evening, everyone. My name is Lorraine and I am an alcoholic. Thank you, Edith. Oh my gosh, that was amazing. It really, really was. I could listen to you and that accent and your peaceful delivery for forever. That was just so beautiful. And I was going to comment on that spiritual triage as well, because you said it and I was just like, I just perked up. So of course I looked up triage immediately because I'm like, what does triage mean anyway? And so it means preliminary assessment in order to determine the urgency of the need for treatment and the nature of the treatment required. And I'm like, oh yeah, that sounds good. Spiritual triage. Yep, that'll fit right into a 12-step call just fine. So thank you for that, because I'm going to carry that forever. And I was just thinking as you were just sharing what you were just sharing that, I'm new in recovery. And in fact, I'm celebrating 11 months today. And
Okay.
I'm realizing that as I have taken these steps and continue to do the 12 steps every day, it always, people always say I live in 10, 11, and 12 every day. I'm like, I don't know how you do that, because I think it's like I left to live through 1 through 12 every day. I don't know how you just do 10, 11, and 12. I'm not really sure how you get there. But anyway, so I'm thinking, so this third step of, turning my will and my life over to God, and 6 and 7 and those character defects, it's like, it occurred to me the other day, oh, I see what's going on here. I have literally asked God to come in and heal me. So all of the areas in my life where I need healing are going to just come right up in my face so that I can heal. So it's like, wow, yeah, really, that's what they mean by careful what you pray for. So it's quite a process, this recovery, and I couldn't be more incredibly grateful and blessed to be in the Zoom era and be able to do this with people all over the world. I just feel like I've in the 4th dimension. You betcha. This is something else. So great to be here tonight.
Thank you, Lorraine.
Thank you, Lorraine. I'm just gonna go around the room and ask someone. Nicole from Milwaukee, would you like to share or ask a question, please?
Sure. Thank you, Philip. And thank you so much, Edith, for that lovely time together and sharing your story. I was really moved when I even wrote it down. It was, when are you going to start praying for your enemy? Let me tell you, that hit me. I don't think I do that nearly often enough. And you're absolutely right. It does change things. It's just really hard to get there. So is that something that you used for like all your resentments, identifying the enemy, praying for your enemy? Is that something that comes more easily as you get further in the program? Please say yes.
Oh, Oh, well, yes, I do use that procedure. Yes, I still use that procedure. You know, I've got some family members that I still don't like at all. And I will write on my pad, Nicole, their name, the cause, what it affects, and what's my part. And I will text that to my sponsor and say, they still suck. You know, here's my inventory. And so I am such a work in progress that yes, I have to pray for a couple of my family members all the time. And I got a hard family, man. You know, I mean, it's alcoholism on parade, man. And my sponsor always says, what kind of an example are you setting, Edith? What are you doing? When I'll say, you know, I'm not sending them any gifts from Egypt. They haven't talked to me in 6 months. They never been to where I live. She said, who cares? I thought you were trying to, you know, do the St. Francis way of life, you know, start acting like it. Who cares what they're doing? What are you doing? What are you doing for all those years that you were in the newspaper when you lived in your small town in Alabama and your younger brothers had to read about you or see you in the county jail? What are you doing to mend all that? You know, as I always say to the women I sponsor, what are we doing to mend all those bullet holes we left in the curtain? Are we really doing, like Don Major says, are you taking the next stitch? Are you making the next stitch? And even if you don't understand it, when I made that effort to still be kind to my brother, he started talking to my husband a couple of weeks ago. And now he texted me. I don't always understand what that looks like. And the other thing I wanted to say to you, Nicole, is in 551, this isn't a new idea that I came up with. In 551, great story, freedom from bondage, which I, by the way, when I was in a halfway house one time many years ago, I had a counselor who had that on, and I thought she had been in S&M. See, I knew she'd been a prostitute, so I thought, why is she still wearing that t-shirt, and what does that mean? Anyway, she told me freedom from bondage means freedom from drugs and alcohol, Edith. And in that story, the woman speaks to a resentment against her mother. And she says, if you have a resentment you want to be free of, if you will pray for the person or the thing that you resent, you will be free. Ask in prayer for everything you want for yourself to be given to them, and you will be free. Ask for their health, their prosperity, and their happiness, even when you don't really want it. And your prayers are only words, and you don't mean it, go ahead and do it. So the action on our part is the transformative piece. Our heart changes. Our perception is changed. I hope that sort of answers your question.
Thank you. Calvin, please unmute yourself.
Hello, everybody. My name is Calvin, and I'm an alcoholic. I want to say just thank you, thank you, thank you. What a great message that you brought tonight. And I heard every word that you said. I heard about when you was in Egypt and you watched them pray 5 times a day. I listened to you talk about Greg Armand, and I loved it, Whipping Post and the members of Elizabeth Reed. I heard every word you said, and I heard your humility. I heard your true humility. And that's what this thing comes down to be. And you talk really strong, just a few minutes about humility and how it comes to us. And I'm just so grateful to be here tonight to hear you, to really hear you, and that's why I come here every Tuesday night. I don't know what's coming, but boy, it's always a storm coming, and you was a storm tonight in my soul. You was a storm. Yes, so I don't have a real question. But I know one thing, I sure heard some answers today. I heard some answers, you know. And and a lot of things are already inside me, but I need somebody to keep on bringing them back to me. And you brought them back to me. You brought it back when you just talked about the resentment with the young lady. When we talk about, you know, I had to pray for my first wife because, you know, I mean, she had met somebody else and moved on. And they told me, you know, what you gonna do? It ain't like I hadn't did the same thing, but it just, when she did it, it wasn't right, you know? And I had to pray, like you talked about, every day, because they told me, just like you just told the young lady, love and hate won't stay in the same spot. What a powerful message. And I don't want to take up a lot of time. And Nate, what I think it is, I think we go out 20 after 9, and we kind of done. I ain't good with the chat thing, so I'm just going to, you know, yell it out there. I love you, man, and thanks, guys. Peace.
Peace.
Thank you, Kelvin. Marcel, would you like to share? Sorry. Okay. Okay. Becca H, would you like to unmute yourself and ask a question? Share.
Hi, everybody. Becca, alcoholic. Edith, thank you so much. I could listen to you for a while, especially that accent. Hard to think that you're in Omaha when that accent is so Arkansasian. But I really liked when you said, "May the God in you recognize the God in me." And I'm going to have to remember that, because I can get irritated with some people because they don't, not quite too sure the word I want is, but I just don't get along with them. You know, it's not that I dislike them, I just don't get along with them. But I have to remember that they're trying as well as I am, people in the fellowship, but they're doing the best they can with the best they have at that time. So all I can ask and hope to remember that is that hopefully I can recognize their God, and maybe that will help me get along with them a little better, because I have to get along with you in the fellowship. May not have to like you, but I do have to get along with you. So thanks for putting that out there.
Thank you, Becca.
Sure. Thank you.
Teresa, please unmute yourself.
Teresa, alcoholic. Thank you so much, Edith. A couple of things. I have questions, just because I'm also like, I want to keep having you. I need some Q&A, so I'm going to throw about 3, just for you to expand on a couple of things. It's interesting to come from a place of rebellion against the idea of God, and then now it appears, from what I heard, to be open to other religious beliefs and practices and the consistency and their devotion. So I want you to talk a little bit more about that, because that's what I heard, your observation of others, as well as it appeared as though you have found your own religious belief and practice. What I love about step 11 is, here is where we can talk about these things. Here is where we can talk about perhaps those religious people are right, and we can revisit that. We can turn to other literature and material to expand upon our conscious contact with God. And it sounds to me as though you have. So I would like you to expand further on that dynamic of how now you watch other people practice and your own religious practices, and any particular books, inspirational books that you've turned to that have assisted and supported your prayer and meditation. And as well as, I believe in the other dimension of ancestors and those who have passed on, and the significance of the continuation of that relationship with them in spirit. So I wondered if you would speak also about that, about the dynamic of that relationship with those who have gone on, who we loved in this life. So that'll keep you busy for a minute.
So yeah, you know, some of this I think is just my own belief system, and I'll take them in as you last entered it and then go backwards. But yeah, I do believe there's other dimensions, and I do think that I get strength and help. In fact, I know it. I'm confident of it because I know it's happened. So I have a, but I believe that's part of the theme that I was trying to present tonight, which is the interconnectedness. C.S. Lewis wrote a book called Mere Christianity, and we don't have any affiliation with any religion. So, I want to make that clear. But in this book, he spoke to, because of course he had an atheist scaffolding, and then things changed with the illness of his wife and his devotion to her. But he talked to the issue or the idea of we're one living organism and we need each other in order to be a cohesive, moving, I can think of many words, but collaborative, loving. We have to be in, because of that one living organism, we have to consider the common welfare and the other person. And are we our brother or sister's keeper? When you're reading, I don't remember if it's 8 or 9, but it says, are we looking at the emotional well-being or the well-being of the other person? And no, I'm usually not. So I do think that runs also from past generations. And then you said, what do I read? I read everything. I love reading. So, but mostly, I'm reading, I'm in a book study that I've been in for 11 years. So we read all AA literature, and we've listened to Chamberlain, we've read Alcoholics Anonymous Comes of Age, we read through the entire Language of the Heart, we read one of my favorites of all time, Dr. Bob and the Good Old Timers. We read, and we meet on Sundays for an hour and a half, and we've been doing it, as I said, for 11 years. So we've been through a lot of the literature. So I love that. I love that. I love being a student. I read a lot of Buddhist literature. I read the Dalai Lama, Thich Nhat Hanh, who just died. I appreciate that, because it gives a person like me to, the question Hannah asked earlier, it gives me a reminder that, I need to be ordinary often. And so, but I'm also love the apocalypse, man. I mean, I watch everything, everything about everything Cormac McCarthy's written, I've read, because I got the dark side, baby. And my husband is a deacon in the Catholic Church. You asked about, do you have a devotion? When he was in his ordination process, I was not for it, because I thought I had too many axes that I needed to grind with Catholicism. And they didn't like me either, because this is, I don't know if there's anyone who's in a diaconate program, but it took 3 years, and your wives were supposed to, saddle up and go with you. And so I would give them my full-throated truth, okay, when they'd ask me about my comments. And I was not well received. And I'm telling you this story because I didn't want to have to be affiliated with the Catholic Church. And now I'm so proud to be a member of my church. And I don't say the entire Nicene Creed, because I'm not sure there's only one baptism for the forgiveness of sins. But I go with a open mind and a sense of gratitude. And the rest of that story is this. I did not want to go through all this training. They did not, as I said, receive me very well. And I've got a guy that I race cars. I used to race cars with, and he was over at my house and I was complaining. And Gary goes, why don't you just substantially conform or perform? Can you do most of what they're asking? It means so much to Richard. And I thought, yes, I can do that. When we get to the end of this, all these couples interview you. And I was confident we didn't do well in the interviews. And they said the deciding factor, because I'm sure it was sketchy with us, me, the deciding factor is Father Peschel. He's going to interview y'all. I knew Peschel. You know why? Because he worked with all the drunk priests in Western Nebraska. So that's who our final interview was with. And because of me, we just made it. And this has been my husband's mission. He goes to prisons. He performs all the rites that he can that are allowed by a deacon. He has metastasized cancer. It has been one of the greatest joys of his life. And had I not been willing to get over my old belief system about organized religion, he might have missed it all. So, yes, I have a religious practice. It doesn't have anything to do with Alcoholics Anonymous, except to tell you that that I operate in that system. And I do it fairly well. And it's a privilege. And I also go to the sweat lodge.
Beautiful. That concludes our sharing and questioning portion of the meeting. I'll give the meeting back to Teresa. Oh, Calvin, sorry.
No, go ahead, Teresa. Go ahead, Cal.